Hey guys, I want to tell you about a couple different types of spoons that I use to catch fish in the fall and also any other time when the bass are offshore and feeding on shad. So the first one that I'll talk about is the Flutter spoon. This thing came about 5 or 6 years ago. It got really popular, but they've been around a long time. People have been using them to catch all kinds of species of fish, and basically all it is a big hunk of metal that's shaped in the shape of like an eating spoon. But they're heavy. A lot of them are around 1 ounce. They make them even bigger now. This one's a 5-inch here, and they make them all the way up to 6-inch and even more. So they're big hunks of metal, and they basically put out a lot of flash in the water. And even though they're big and heavy, they actually kind of fall slow, like a feather would fall through air. Not quite as slow as that, but that's the action. And they'll kind of slip around, they'll slide out, they'll flip, they'll flutter. That's where it gets its name. But it puts out a lot of flash, and it does put out some vibration as well. So the fish can really key in on it. If they're active, if they're chasing big shad, gizzard shad for example, or if they're just schooled up, they're on shad, a flutter spoon can be really effective. So I want to show you a couple of things that will help you catch more fish on these big spoons. Now, because these things are so heavy and big, you want to have a good rod to throw them on that it's going to get the bait out there, but also help you work the bait. I like to use at least a 7-foot rod. That's actually a little underpowering. You really want to go up to a 7.6. I've even thrown it on a 7.8 before. But a medium heavy action rod with a fast action tip. So that's going to allow you to load the bait, throw it really far, and it's also going to let you work the bait effectively in the water. But one of the things you'll notice when you start to work the flutter spoon is it puts out a lot of drag, so you'll need that extra power in the rod. And the action of how you work these things is, first of all, when you cast it out on your spot, you found your offshore area, you've thrown your buoy out, you know where your fish are, you want to throw it out, make a long cast, you want to let it hit the water and start sinking down, and feed it some line. And at this point, I like to lower the rod a little bit, and I like to feed it line. I like to use fluorocarbon because it's low stretch, and the fish can't see it as well, but I like to use around 15 to 20 pound, and I'll feed it line, and as it's fluttering, the line will stay tight, and you want to let it go all the way to the bottom. It's where the fish are, and then work it through them. So a lot of times you'll actually get a bite on the initial fall, so you really need to pay attention there. But after it gets to the bottom, engage the reel, point the rod at 10 o'clock, and reel fast 4 to 6 times. And I like to give it an extra pop right at the end. What that does, it puts a little extra slack in your line to let the bait fall effectively again. And so you really just want to pay attention for those jumps and twitches in your line. It can a lot of times be a hard jerk. So when you see a bite happen, you don't want to swing quite yet. I like to go ahead and just reel down a few times and see if I feel the fish there. What happens is, if you reel too quickly or you set the hook, the bait will just jerk out of the strike zone, and they'll not see it. They can't pick it up again. They may be feeding on other shad down there, so they may go after some more shad. So you want to do your best to try to keep that bait in the strike zone until they actually grab it. The fish can actually fight over these things, so you may get 2, 3, 4, 5. I've had as many as up to 10 strikes on one cast with these flutter spoons. So you just have to be patient with them. They're really erratic, and they're hard to hit for a bass, but they will eat them. One of the things to help combat these things flying out of the bass's mouth, because you got to remember this is a big hunk of metal, you got a treble hook on here. One of the things that's going to help you help you keep the fish hooked up is adding a barrel swivel to the split ring. A barrel swivel is going to help with line twist as well when you're fishing the bait, because it will tend to twist up your fluorocarbon. But when that fish is flopping around, swinging, trying to jump this big piece of metal out, it's going to give it less torque. The fish has less torque when you have that barrel swivel up top. So that's a good tip I'll give you when fishing these things. And that goes with spoons in general. But these big flutter spoons are a lot of fun, and I like to fish them when the fish are really active. I see them on the graph, they're moving around, and it can really fire a school of bass up if they're not in, if they're not biting a crankbait or a swim bait or something like that. These big flutter spoons can be a really effective tool on fish like that. So one of the other spoons that I'll use later in the fall when the water gets a little bit colder, or other times of the year when the bass are just a little lethargic and they're not moving around as much, they don't want to chase a big flutter spoon or a crankbait or something like that, I like to get right on top of them using the electronics, and I'll do vertical jigging. And I like to use a metal vertical jigging spoon. The one that I use, I like to use a Castmaster, and there's actually another brand by Bass Pro Shops called a Wing Rider that are almost identical. The Bass Pro version is just cheaper. The way this thing falls, it has a little bit of a more of erratic action to it. It's not quite like your standard lead jigging spoon where it just goes up and down and it does nothing. This one actually will dart a little bit off to the side. It's not like a flutter spoon where it's going all over the place, but it just gives it that little extra dying shad look, and I really like it. I've done really well on these. I've caught as many big bass on these small spoons as I have the big flutter spoons. So it's something I've never really gone into detail about, but I have caught a ton of fish on these, and I've used them quite a lot. I also figured out that you can catch big bass down below those schools of, say, stripers or white bass fishing these things. I had a tournament one year on Lake Norman where I did nothing but fish small spoons like these underneath schools of striper for big spotted bass. So they are really effective. You do have to use your electronics to get on top of these fish, but once you do, it's just a jigging action straight up and down, and you want to get it to where you think the fish are and reel it just a little bit above them, so just keeps their attention up. I like to use a barrel swivel again on the split ring up front where the line goes. That's going to reduce the line twists and also help when the fish jumps. One thing you'll notice on both the small casting spoons and the flutter spoons is when you hook these fish, they're going to come up, from deep water, especially on the big flutter spoon. They feel that big thing in their mouth, they want to throw it out. So adding that barrel swivel really does help. I do like to use a little bit of a feathered treble and make sure you have a good hook on there. Sometimes I'll even increase the size of the hook just a hair. But 3/8 and half ounce I throw most of the time, and chrome and nickel on both of these spoons. Sometimes I'll throw gold if it's overcast conditions, low light conditions, but I would say 70% of the time I'm throwing your standard nickel plate, or maybe a little shad version of it. But these spoons are really effective in clear water. You don't want to throw these things in muddy water or super stained water. They're not going to have the same effect. That might be better with a crankbait or something that's going to put out some more sound. These spoons are a really visual bait, so clear water to stained water is where it works the best, and it's offshore spots. It's offshore humps, long extended points out in the water, creek channel bends. Those are places, especially in the fall, where you'll tend to find schooling bass that are on those shad after they come out of those creeks and they're heading out towards their deep water spots, and eventually they'll go into their winter haunts and stay out in deep water. So one other thing I'll mention on the casting spoons, the jigging spoons, I will use spinning gear a lot of the time on these, just because it's easy to get the bait down quick. I don't have to feed it any line, and I'll use 10 to 12 pound fluorocarbon line, just just depending on water clarity. Medium action, you want a medium action so you can keep the fish hooked up, and something around 7 foot works great. So that's all the tips I have on spoons. It's really been a great technique for me over the years. I hope this helps you guys this fall, and don't be afraid to throw them other times of the year. They really do work, and I will catch y'all next time.
How far back was that?
30 feet back. It's ridiculous.
Fruits got another one here on the buzz bait.
Look at that.
Texas fruit. You know,
Try it out.
Oh, yeah.